Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Mind the Moment's Tuesday morning mindfulness session, brought to you by Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare. This is the place where we invite mindfulness instructors to talk with us about what mindfulness means to them, and also discuss as a community how we can incorporate these practices into our daily lives. I'm Suzanne Rowe Palacino, and I am very happy to be here with Paul Fulton, a clinical psychologist and psychotherapist, longtime meditator and mindfulness instructor. Good morning, Paul.
Good morning.
So nice to have you here.
Well, reserve your judgment.
We're going to have a good morning, I can already tell. So today we'll start off with a question for the group, as always. We've decided, as I've mentioned in last couple of sessions, to begin with the guided meditation, so folks who might have 9 a.m. meetings can jump off if necessary. So once Paul will lead the guided meditation and share some thoughts with us. And then after that, we'll have time for questions and answers. So with that, if you can go to the bottom of your screen and click on the chat, and make sure to, if you're interested in seeing panelists and attendees' comments, you can click that drop-down menu, and that enables you to see everybody's comments and see how the discussion is going. Okay, so now we move on to our question. Paul, what question do you have for our group this morning?
Well, can I ask you a question first? Is it possible to see the people who are in attendance?
Not on the webinar, unfortunately,
Okay,
but yeah.
well, that was my question, so we should all just go our own ways now. Sorry. So here's my question, and the questions to me that are always most interesting in this practice are those that arise in practice. You know, they're not academic, they're not theoretical. They always come from the kind of cutting edge of my own life experience. And for me, the driving force is always of practice is always, how do I meet moments of suffering, right? How do I respond when things are not as I wish them to be? That's the reason we practice, right? For me anyway. So with the pandemic, and by the way, I'm a clinical psychologist, so I hear a lot about this from patients, and when I speak with my colleagues as well, I hear the same thing, which is everyone without exception seems to be more symptomatic than they were before the pandemic. And this is unprecedented. And very often, if you ask people how they are, they're fine. But I take that to mean COVID fine, which means I'm fine until those moments when something erupts. You know, some mind state, some sense that things are intolerable or some level of irritability or reactivity. So that's a long wind-up to this question, which is, what have you been able to find in your mindfulness practice that you've been able to bring to bear? Or what are your efforts arising out of mindfulness that you bring to bear on those moments when you're really troubled, when you're suffering, when you're trapped, when you feel like you want to explode, you want to disappear, pull the covers over your head, right? How's it working for you, in other words, in the broadest terms?
Yeah, it's a really important question. I know for me, I find I go to my breath. You know, taking a deep breath has been helpful for me. Feeling my feet on the floor. Someone's mentioned here, being determined to be part of the solution instead of part of the problem. And someone also mentioned mindfulness meditation has helped me a lot to focus on my breathing.
Yeah. I love the notion of the breath, because one of the reasons we use the breath as a primary object is because for most people, it's a pretty neutral thing. And so it's a bit like when the world seems on fire and you look into the sky and you see the birds, right, who don't have a clue. And the breath is like that. The breath can actually be something outside of that moment of suffering, bringing us to something neutral and familiar.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of comments about breath. I do a lot of breath work every day for several minutes, short walks, which I know I definitely will do just getting out and getting some fresh air. Slip away into reading or TV. Laying down on the floor and doing a body scan is my go-to method for meeting moments of mental suffering. That's a good one.
So what's interesting is I'm already hearing broadly, in a sense, two things. One of them is distraction, right? Exercise, TV, and the other is actually to go into the experience, right? To be with experience.
Hmm.
And I don't know that there's not space for both of those things.
Yeah. Helpful to find gratitude, being in nature, taking a long, deep breath. Paul, what do you do?
Well, I suppose different things at different times. For me, one of the most effective, if short-term, medicines is music.
Hmm.
So if conditions permit, I'll put on some loud music and dance. Sitting is often paradoxical. I have a routine where I'll get up in the morning, have some coffee, open up my laptop, and ease my way carefully into the New York Times. And then I watch my own level of tension and distress rise, which isn't a good thing to do. And then I'll go to the cushion and I will sit with that sense of distress, that sense of, it's not a pleasant feeling. And it's not one that I actually want to go into, but I notice that if I turn toward it and just allow it, it generally speaking abates and turns into something else. So the willingness to be with that unpleasantness seems to me to be at the heart of what mindfulness has to offer.
Yeah. And do you find that when you sit with it, I'm sure it has varying degrees of how long it takes to dissipate, but are there times when it just doesn't go away?
I have not found anything that doesn't go away. It doesn't mean that when I'm sitting, I will necessarily be calm or peaceful. I mean, that just seems to have its own random variation from day to day. But I am cautious about entering the meditation for the purpose of trying to make it go away. A friend of mine said, he's a long-term meditator, he said, he no longer meditates to get anywhere or to get anything. I said, so why do you do it? And he said, to see what's there. So that's the kind of attitude that I try to bring to the practice, just to see what is there and to be with it as wholly as possible.
Mm. Yeah, that's great. That's great to hear. I'm sure that's very helpful to everyone else as well. Thank you everyone for sharing your thoughts on that. I think that was really good. So this is a great time where we can transition into our time to meditate and our practice, Paul. So I'll hand it
Good.
off to you.
All right. So this will be a relatively brief meditation. With that in mind, without trying to get anywhere, okay, let's just assume a comfortable position. Whatever works for you is fine. And then if you wish, allowing your eyes to close. And I'll do a start bell and an ending bell and make just a few comments, but I won't be speaking much. So for the next 12 or 13 minutes, let's just see if it's possible to sit with complete alertness while allowing everything to be just exactly as it is. Something's unpleasant, you want it to be gone, just noticing this. There's an urgency to get on with the day, just notice that energy. Our job for the next 10 minutes or so is to do absolutely nothing at all, but to notice how it actually is for you and to allow it to be without judgment. So as we sit here like this, we may ask, what is already present that wishes to be known? And can we be with it just as it is? And can we drop all agendas for this moment?
Thank you, Paul.
Anybody injured? So may I offer just one other small reflection before we go into some more discussion? You know, we have all kinds of ideas about how we want it to be, how we want to feel. You know, we want to feel good. We want to be at peace. And a little bit of examination reveals how little of the time we're actually in that place where we want to be. So there's always this kind of restless energy that is intended to try to move us in the direction of where we want to go. And it really doesn't work so well. And I think one of the values of this kind of practice is that it invites us to actually rest in life as it is. And as it is not necessarily to our liking. It is not a reflection particularly of how we wish for it to be, but it is completely reliable. You know, what we're really doing when we drop into experience as it is we are opening to the very experience of life itself as manifest in this moment, as manifest as a moment of sleepiness or restlessness or itching or desire or anxiety or depression, whatever it happens to be. This is the truth of life in that moment. And what we're allowing ourselves to do is to touch life in its most authentic form by, for the moment, dropping the effort to turn it into something else and simply allow for it to be expressed in our lives. So it's a way of waking up to life as it is, not to how we wish for it to be. This is a bit different than the motivation that we usually bring when we begin practice, which is, I want to feel better. Of course we want to feel better. And paradoxically, the way that we come to feel better is by dropping the need to try to manipulate our experience, to turn it into something more to our liking. So that's that.
Yeah, really interesting. And I guess on that point, as you talk about that, it seems if we let things be as they are, do they gradually become more as we thought we wanted them to be?
I would say that's probably an empirical question. What actually happens as we continue to practice? My own sense is not that we change conditions, but rather we learn to begin to relinquish our need for it to be different. And in that process, things change. Not because conditions change, but because we cease to be rebellious all the time and struggling. We begin to let go of the struggle little by little. And in that, there's greater ease.
Yeah, very wise. It makes me think about how when people deal with pain, many times the pain is exacerbated by our resistance to the pain. And if we can somehow just sit with it, at least the resistance goes away, and that takes away some of the negativity of the pain.
Yeah. One of the things that I noticed once was, I can't remember the exact circumstances, but I noticed that I was complaining a lot, mostly on the inside. And I thought, well, this doesn't actually feel good. I mean, a lot of the time we think if we can complain, we can get it off our chest or something, clear the air. But what I noticed is that I actually didn't like the sound of my own complaining, and I made as a piece of my practice to work with complaining. So fortified by mindfulness, which allows us to sort of see what our minds are up to, first, the important piece was noticing when I was doing it. And it was pretty easy to relinquish complaining to other people, because I can tell you nobody really wanted to hear my complaints. The more difficult and subtle piece is stopping complaining in here, catching it, noticing it, and dropping it, because it accomplishes nothing. And all it does is elevates my being at odds with what is occurring or being disapproving, and it doesn't help. And so what's interesting is even with a kind of a focused exercise like this, I think I complain a lot less. It's like, oh yeah, this difficult thing has happened. Yep. End of story. You know, my disapproval isn't going to influence it one bit.
Hmm.
It's only going to put me at greater odds. Yeah.
Yeah. Gosh, the word of the day is acceptance, I guess, and that's, we realize sometimes in the beginning, I think it's difficult, but if we can see that ease come into our body, we'll realize that it works.
Well, this acceptance is difficult business because when things are really unpleasant, we might say to ourselves, I must accept this. But by its nature, the quality of those experiences is sometimes that we want to banish them. They're unacceptable, and we want to run. And sometimes the strength of the unpleasant experience is so great that it overwhelms any intention that we have to try to be accepting. The insistence on being accepting is like, trying to chip it away at a mountain with a plastic spoon. Forget about it. So what does acceptance mean in those moments? Well, I don't know. Maybe it's possible to be generous with ourselves and kind, to not be judging for the fact that our mindfulness feels powerless in those moments. Or to use the words of one of my teachers, sometimes all we can do is to point our bow into the wake and let the waves crash over the deck. It may be that when our suffering is too great, mindfulness may seem too challenging, and that we work at the lower levels, those things that are more accessible, incrementally. And then we find that when the big things hit, we can be surprised that it doesn't have the same impact that it might have had a week, a year, 10 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. And, interestingly enough, what does acceptance feel like? Maybe that's the question. What does that feel like?
Yeah.
And I guess it's different for everyone. But does it feel, that our shoulders loosen a little bit? Our neck gets a little less tight.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, there's something about that acceptance that comes down to, oh, this. Oh, yeah, this. Now this. How interesting.
Just acknowledging.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Allowing whatever this is to be, and allowing whatever comes to replace it to be as well. I often think of it as opening both the front door and the back door, so that whatever wind blows in, just it comes, but it also finds its exit.
Yeah.
Yeah, less resistance, Tara has written.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, someone had mentioned about the sound of the bell, and I want to just, a little trick in Zoom is I can turn on original sound, which means it's not using compression. And so I don't know if you've ever noticed, you ring a bell on Zoom and usually it sounds horrible because it cuts out. And so I turn it off when I use the bell. That's just a brief aside.
Good to know. Someone has also mentioned acceptance is a word that for me becomes almost trite, whereas relinquish the need for things to be different speaks to me.
Well, acceptance becomes another demand to try to do something differently. The very command to be accepting is paradoxical because it's like, how do I accept this? I know I'm supposed to accept this. I can't accept this. It's not good. So indeed, what does that mean in this moment? Well, it might mean the simple acknowledgement that I'm not okay with this, right? I'm not okay with what is happening right now. Can we accept that? Can we accept being non-accepting as the truth of the moment? Now, this gets very confusing, I know. Don't mean to get all sort of hocus pocus about it. But the beauty of this practice is that these very questions are the ones that are constantly raised in the course of our lives. How is this right now? Can I be with this? How am I traversing this moment? And the question invites the answer itself, which is just like this, maybe well, maybe poorly. But the virtue of present moment is that it is true. It is the truth of the moment.
Mm.
And it is fundamentally trustworthy, even if it is not to our liking.
Mm. Yeah. So good. So good. Thank you, Paul. Just your
Pleasure.
insights and wisdom, and very helpful for the time that we're in. So I hate to bring it to an end, but as all good things must come to an end. So we thank you. Thank you.
Well,
Thank you.
thank you, and everybody. Keep going. Keep practicing.
Yeah. Amen. So let's, a couple of things ways to keep in touch with us. Thursday morning, we will have Tara Healy here to join us in another discussion, which is always rich and fulfilling. Visit us at our website, Living Well at Home, to check out yoga classes, Zumba classes, as well as wellness webinars. Check out our resources on mindful.org/pain, our partnership with Mindful Magazine. And these resources are in English as well as in Spanish. Also visit us on Facebook and visit us on our YouTube channel, where these sessions, older sessions, and some sessions that Tara has interviewed different mindfulness researchers all reside. So again, I know we went a little bit long here today, but I think it was just such a rich discussion. We're so happy for all of you to be here with us this morning. And we will see you again on Thursday. Thanks for joining. And thank you, Paul.